Thanks, Ron. And again, I wish I could have been there, guys. I'm actually in the Philadelphia area. I just could not make it there today. But as always, I appreciate the opportunity to work with Ron and Angel Lead. It's always a fascinating set of topics, and especially the last two about security, right? I mean, the security is job one here at AWS, but certainly it's an important thing. And I think all these things work together. And I think as mentioned before, is no one really knows what's running in their data center often, and that is a true story. And we'll actually cover some of that here today. But again, two certainly awesome topics, and stuff coming after is equally as fascinating. So again, thank you, Ron, for the time. So I am John O'Donnell. I'm a principal solution architect here in AWS. I've been here for about 5 years. I'm what's called our migration ambassador for the Northeast. So basically, anything that happens with moving your platform to AWS, I'm generally involved with. Just some background is actually I led the first big pharma move to the cloud, to the precursor of Office 365. If anyone remembers Microsoft Office Online, or BPOS-D, and that was GlaxoSmithKline, 140,000 users when it was called the public cloud back in 2008. So that was a pretty big move, made a lot of news at the time. And then I also recently helped Vanguard, who's up in Malvern here, move from on-prem to AWS, and actually kind of moving out of their data centers, literally moving thousands of servers, as well as moving their entire code base for their trading platform into our container platform. Is called Fargate. And that was actually featured at reInvent, which is our big kind of get together with Werner Vogels, who's our CTO. So so been kind of on all different sides of the spectrum, and also maybe, just regular sized customers too, helping them move a couple hundred servers, right? Been doing that. So, so the agenda, we'll cover a few of these. I'm not going to go into too deep, but kind of the business drivers. What are the parts of the big pieces of the migration: the beginning, the middle, and the end? And then the 7 R's, which are kind of the different ways that you migration strategies that you can choose. And I'll give you some guidance on when to pick what. So there's many business drivers. I mean, I think as far as, with this economy and the recession and things like that, and I've been there. So when we were in Glaxo in 2008, 2009, there was a downturn. We had a patent cliff. We had to save a lot of money. And the cloud was a significant savings. We knocked 40% off our IT spend for our collaboration platform, which was a huge number back in the day for 140,000 people, if you can imagine. But so cost savings is certainly a huge mover for people moving to the cloud. Merger and acquisition is that companies tend to just acquire a company, throw a canvas string next to that, into their data center, do a domain join, and okay, we're good. And as was mentioned before, you end up having 6 or 7 replicas of similar software that's maybe off version, those type of things, right? So that's a big driver for the cloud. Companies are going through acquisition, they'll acquire a company and move within 90 days their assets into AWS, and then decommission their existing data center. That's a huge strategy I'm seeing a lot of. End of life, Windows 2008, Windows 2012, there's always the kind of a cycle of kind of, in other operating systems, right? Hardware and software. So people are moving to the cloud to kind of go to a modern platform. And of course, cost. So let me cover briefly a cost, just a kind of a power slide here. But I think the 17 months Live Nation, which has zillions of servers, I don't know the exact number, but they're a big, big company. Immediately by moving to AWS, they save 18% off their current spend. And after optimization, which is kind of right sizing, tuning your AWS platform, they were to save another 40%. So over 50% savings in about 17 months, right? As a former accountant, I was an accountant before I went to IT. Your CFO, your CEO is going to pay attention to numbers like that, right? And uptime, 939s, right? That's a lot of uptime, right? 99.9% sounds impressive. That's actually very impressive for most on-prem data centers. You can just completely beat that in AWS or any of the cloud vendors presenting today can do way better than 99.9. That's kind of, and then just increasing, be able to do more faster, in minutes and hours versus weeks and months. I mean, I remember provisioning Sun servers, M4000s, take any people on the line back. That literally would take 9 months from ordering to shipping to provisioning to loading the operating system to putting the current version of work on there. 9 months for a business project just to get the server ready so we can start putting stuff onto it. I can do that today in minutes, right? Or hours, right? Depending on what I'm doing. But these guys can do way more for less, faster, and way everything is today, faster is often better. And you can try things and you don't like it, like Jake says here, get rid of it. Boom, delete it, deprovision it, it goes away. You don't have to. You're not stuck with a depreciable asset that you have for 3 to 5 years sitting in your data center. So let's go through the 3 phases of migration. Assess, mobilize, migrate, modernize. Is pretty much, again, any move to any cloud, you're going to kind of see these stages, right? So assess is building the business case, doing kind of an early discovery, right? So do I have, as was shown earlier, do I have 9,000 servers? Do I have 6,000 servers? I don't know. Often they don't know. And you'll see different systems with different, and I've seen very, very big customers that really don't have a full grasp of what they're running. And I'll kind of show you some of the discovery tools that we have. Then we go into mobilize, which is, okay, I have a general, I know what I have now. I know what the business case is. I have approval and budget. Let's prepare the environment. Let's prepare the AWS landing zone, as it's called, right, to accept the migrated assets. And the migrate is actually, let's do that. But this order is very important. A lot of people try to jump into migration first. They don't have a plan. They don't have somewhere to put it. Guess what? It doesn't work, right? Then if you go back to the beginning and start over, you'll be very successful. So these are very important stages to go through. So how do we assess? And these are all tools that AWS offers. We also have business partners that I'll get to later that do this and then some, right? But basically is your current IT snapshot is coming from a plethora of data sources, a CMDB, running servers, just like somebody who stood up a beige box somewhere and under their desk and is running a mission critical system. That I've literally seen that happen, right? Where someone kicked the server and the power down and their LDAP system went offline because it was like one custom component that a developer wrote and they couldn't rehost it, right? So like you really need to know what your assets are, what your inventory is, right? From those, you can build a business case, you can assess your readiness, and they can kind of track the progress of the beginning of the migration. Again, so we have 3 tools: Migration Evaluator. I'll show you that in a second. Migration Readiness Assessment. That's kind of a survey, and you can do that with your AWS account team. And it's going to kind of give you basically a questionnaire and kind of do a heat map as far as your readiness to migrate. And often you'll find out that, hey, we got really good staff, they're really technical people. We don't have the migration experience, or we don't have a fast enough network pipe, right? This will help you kind of screen that really quickly and help you build a plan with a partner or AWS ProServe on kind of a migration plan. And the Migration Hub, again, I'll show you in a bit, helps you track and trace your migration. So this is probably very hard to see because I can barely read it and I have a giant screen in front of me, but Migration Evaluator is a tool that you can load either if you're familiar with the RV tool, right? So a dump from VMware, if you just have a spreadsheet of kind of your assets, right, with some utilization numbers. And there's also an agent or agentless approach that we can provide to you that'll do much deeper inspection of your system. And Migration Evaluators can do what I had to do the hard way in the old days was actually go in, assess each system, look at the utilization of the system, which systems are actually doing something, right? And give you basically a cost optimized approach that is very realistic, right? It's not a rosy scenario. And if you, again, very hard to see here, but in this example, there's what we call zombies, right? So basically servers are doing nothing. They might even be powered down. We'll just get rid of them, right? You do your assessment. Do I need these zombie servers? No, retire them. And retiring is one of the 7 R's and is actually the easiest way. Just turn off the system. No one screams for 30 days. Decommission it. That's how it works. There's significant cost savings. And then, different options. Generally, with most of our customers, a lot of our customers I'm seeing in this kind of market are running Windows. SQL Server will actually help you also for free with optimization techniques for running Windows workloads in AWS. And again, this is free. You don't have to pay for this. That's something you have to, hire professional services for. This is something you work with your account team on. And again, having built business cases before and as an accountant, this is a great tool. And again, hard to see over here, but there's a bunch of kind of really deep dives. You can go into costing, amortization schedules, things like that again, a financial person would be very interested in seeing. We generally use these to present to the C-level to make the business case and get the approval to go to the next stage. So now that that's done, we what's called the mobilize stage. So we have business approval, we have interest, we have a level of budget. Now we have to do a deeper discovery, right? Generally what that is doing a much deeper inspection of the servers. How does each server talk to servers? Are they talking to databases? What are the applications? Is a app server talking to a REST-based web service on this server, which is calling that server, which has a connection to a database, right? All that kind of that tangled web. And we'll kind of get into some of what those examples look like in a second. And then also making sure that it meets the business needs, right? So obviously at the end of the day, IT's, is value to the business of whatever your business might be. The migration strategies, this is the 7 R's that I described. I won't read them to you. The level of effort is getting rid of something's the easiest thing. Just turn it off and see you later, right? Up to, replatforming and refactoring, right? So like refactoring is, again, I'll cover that, takes the longest. People tend to want to jump into that first, but there is a path that will help you optimize your move into the cloud. So remember those. This is a kind of a good thing when you're talking about with people in your business who say, I want to jump into cloud native, I want to jump into modern applications, right? Great idea. Pick 2 or 3. It's not going to be 300, right? It's going to take you years to get that level. So that's kind of why this is kind of showing the level of effort there. So now we're in mobilize. What are we doing? We're basically, if you're familiar with AWS, you have a set of AWS accounts. Before we had certain tooling, you do multiple accounts. So I have an account for administration, I have an account for actually hosting applications, I have accounts for logging and security tools. All the tools that were shown earlier would run maybe in separate AWS accounts from a security perspective, right? They'd be inspecting incoming network traffic, ingress, egress, logging, doing detection, those type of things, right? So you need somewhere, a landing zone as we call it, is like you need somewhere to put your stuff, right? And it's a starting point for everything, for new development, for experimentation, for migrating. It's basically just somewhere to put your things in AWS. What you don't want to do is just kind of wing it. And I've had customers who, again, if you're not familiar with how AWS works, an AWS account is basically a standalone entity. And you'll create multiple. So if you're familiar with Azure, it's a little bit different. Google, it's a little bit different. AWS accounts are kind of all standalone, kind of just, they don't talk to each other unless you want them to. They lumped everything as one big account. And they had a real hard time kind of breaking it apart and doing following best practices. So we came up with what's called Control Tower, which is a tool that will provision for you. It's basically a best practice based approach of setting up a fully functional production ready, obviously working with security and networking and those type of things, set of AWS accounts that will provide automation. So for example, service catalog will provision additional accounts. Hey, development comes to you and says, I want to create a new account. I want to test out this brand new service AWS has. You don't want that in your production network because developers, right? So you create like a development account, you wall it off, you let them have a little sandbox, right? That's what you can do that for an automation process. Organizations, if you're familiar kind of with how Microsoft Active Directory, LDAP, kind of a hierarchy, OUs, those type of things, right? It's kind of a similar type of approach for that. Single sign-ons built in. I set up log accounts, audit accounts, right? So I know what's going on. And those security tools that were shown earlier, we work with those companies, they audit this, they look at this data, and they'll give you recommendations or flag things, right? So again, this is the easiest way to get started is create an AWS account, get landing zone, provision by control tower, its best practices. It'll put a set of guardrails in place to prevent things from happening preventatively, as well as adding detective controls with partners, as well as some built-in AWS services. So lessons learned while we're in here, firewalls. If you've done any type of, firewall any type of inspection tools that are kind of going back to the cloud. If you have generally firewalls, you got to open up some ports and things like that. Those tend to slow things down a little bit. Security is great, but network security, those type of things. So often you're just going to have to make sure that you work very closely with whatever partner or company you're working with their inspection tools to make sure that firewalls are the rules are proper, etc. Data has gravity. As data moves, if all your data is on-prem and your applications are in the cloud, on-prem is still going to kind of rule the roost, right? So as your data moves to a cloud vendor, that achieves a prominence, but everything kind of follows the gravity. Think about like the sun, everything's going to circle around the sun because the data is the most important thing in the cloud. And again, think about partners. You have a large migration. I was saying over 1 to 200 instances. Don't go on your own. Bring in a partner. Tooling. Understand what tools are out there. I'll cover some of them, but there's a lot, right? So I said, bring in a partner who can help you with recommendations of the right tools for that. And dependency mapping matters. Again, it was mentioned earlier. So I'm going to show you a shock and awe chart here, but like this is an example of dependency mapping. So this is basically servers and services. This is a TIBCO type of approach, right? All talking back and forth to each other. How would you move this to the cloud? You're going to take, basically just which machine goes first? Is it this one? Is it this one? Is it this one? I don't know, right? So that's part of what's called dependency mapping and coming up with a plan to move your applications into the cloud. So we've kind of done the discovery, we've kind of done the assessment and the prioritization. Now we're going to determine the migration path. So before you start and you've done that type of deeper type of discovery, you can load that data from either our tooling or other tools into what's called a AWS Migration Hub. And that's going to give you a list of all your on-prem servers, let you build what's called wave plans, which is a prioritization is, okay, I can move my development servers over first, then my test servers, and then my production servers I'm going to do over a weekend and move my database server first, then my business server, then my app server, or whatever. So it gives you a plan to help you track a successful migration. And then it'll give you charts and dashboards that you can share with management. Because trust me, if you're in a migration, the most important thing is getting it done correctly. There's no real value in migrating. It's getting it done and achieving the value of the cloud. Management, whether it's IT, business, or corporate, we're very interested in you in getting this done as soon as possible. So let's go into some strategies. So apologies. Relocate. So relocate is basically relocating your assets into the cloud. It is generally as a rule the fastest way to get into cloud. We have a partnership with VMware. So most companies are running VMware on-prem. It's what people have been running for the last 10 plus 20 years. Physical servers, not so much are really out there. But it's essentially VMware Cloud is a partnership that AWS has directly with VMware, so that we're not going through a third party, we're not managing through another service provider. This is AWS and VMware building this together. VMware Cloud is basically a logical extension of your data center. So you can extend your network into VMware, into VMC Cloud, VMware Cloud, slide instances over for vMotion, different types of different types of VMware migration tools, as it were. I can take a server from here and just slide it over to there. I don't like it, I can slide it back, right? That's called vMotion. So there's lots of different ways we can do this. But think about VMware Cloud as as an extension of your current VMware implementation. You can leverage your current VMware skills, right? And if you don't like VMware Cloud, you can roll it back to VMware on-prem, no problem, right? By far, it's the fastest way. That a customer moved over 300 instances in a few weeks with this approach, and actually had a customer that emergency data center exit from Eastern Europe into the Germany region, where they had to move 1,200 instances in less than 2 weeks, right? It was a wartime type of issue with everything going on in Ukraine. If you've ever moved data centers or ever migrated 1,200 servers in 2 weeks, is a lot. And then the only way they were able to do that is with VMC Cloud. So again, hopefully you don't have that problem. But again, you want to go to the cloud quickly, effectively, without a lot of change to your current operating processes. VMware Cloud is the best game in town. So the next strategy is kind of rehosting. And this is what's kind of lovingly called lift and shift. And that's you're changing the instance that you're running slightly, moving it to what's called EC2 for a compute instance, which is our kind of virtual machine platform. And you can do this in an automated manner or manually. And we have a service that's called Application Migration Service, and it's abbreviated as MGN. I don't know who in marketing came up with that, but whatever it is, that's what it's called. So it is agent-based. It does block level replication. If you're familiar with Cloud Endure, this is just the rebranding of Cloud Endure. Anytime any storage on your instance, or even a physical server, changes, that block is captured, the delta sent over to AWS. It's saved on our side. And again, you can see here, it's pretty much anything that runs x86. I've moved all of these and then some. People go from different cloud providers, from different virtualization services, even physical servers can be moved with Cloud Endure. The greatest thing is, again, if you've moved data centers before, the cutover time. I can take a machine that's running in on-prem, go through a cutover, have the exact replica of that machine up and running in between 5 and 20 minutes. It's that, Linux is going to be less than 5 minutes often. Windows, it might be more than 20 minutes, but that's an average, is that you can move a machine from here to there. It's fully replicated. There's a cutover process, and that machine's operating just as it was on-prem. Generally, customers don't even know anything's happened. So again, a little bit more work than VMware Cloud, because VMware Cloud is literally instantaneous with vMotion. This is 5 to 20 minutes, but it's also significantly, there's a smaller price to run this. So you want to lift and shift, you want to go, and again, this is probably the most common use case I've seen in going to AWS by far, this service. So let's look at,
John?
Sure.
John?
Yep.
I'd find, about 5 minutes more, because is that okay?
Yeah. So migration strategies, we're going to replatforming. So we have a few tools for replatforming. One is really cool. It's called App to Container. Again, this can take legacy IIS, .NET, and Java applications and move them directly into Docker-based containers, which you can run in our ECS Fargate or Elastic Kubernetes service, right? So that's a great platform, great tool to look at to directly start really getting to a more modern architecture, leveraging containers. And then replatforming databases. Often moving a database into any cloud provider kind of as is with an instance is a lot of work. There's a lot of kind of additional tuning and whatnot with that. Our DMS service provides basically an ability for you to replicate and copy data from an on-prem database server to any type of database server, any type of data service that we offer. You can actually change. I can go from Oracle to say PostgreSQL, right? It's kind of built in. I can put things onto what's a Snowball Edge, which is basically a storage device that we ship to you. You mail it to us. We load it up into a database server, and you're off and running. So again, replatforming, a little bit more work, but you can modernize legacy platforms very quickly with that. And then refactoring, as I mentioned earlier, here's an example. Some people work with AS400s, AAX, P-Series, Solaris, right? There's no real good path for the most part, taking those to any cloud provider, right? You can rewrite that, and this is an example of that. I won't go into the details of that. But I think is what is really exciting, and I gave a presentation with Ron earlier this year, is our mainframe modernization service that we have. They can literally help you. It will literally move mainframe applications into AWS, into a modern platform, right? It'll take COBOL, it'll take JC, it'll take different types of legacy code bases, convert them into Java, and run it in a modern platform. So if you have mainframes you don't know what to do with, totally take a look at that. And then, in closing, where are we seeing kind of most of the strategies happening? It's in Rehost and Replatform, as I mentioned. Relocate could be, with VMware Cloud, could be your use case. Sometimes it's a little bit of both, right? But I think, these are some areas. But again, look at this, because jumping 100% of your portfolio to refactoring is going to take a very long period of time, where I can get 80–90% of the benefit by kind of moving things and then modernizing. I think that's the approach that we're seeing is the most successful. And if you just need to move like gobs of data, we have kind of these snow services, which basically are hard drives. Basically, think about it, just highly hardened military grade hard drives. We mail to you, you load all your network, you get all your data, you mail it back to us. We load it to what's our S3 service. And if you got ridiculous amounts of data, like hundreds of petabytes, we can actually send out like a tractor trailer that has a bunch of hard drives. I've never actually had anyone doing this, but we can do that, right? Generally, military or government customers have this type of data. And then we have programs in place. This is where like VARs and different AWS partners can help you, but like we will help you move anything you have in AWS. There's funding models, there's proof of concepts. We have there's lots of free services that we can offer to you to help you accelerate that journey. And as I mentioned, there's a ton of partner tools out there to help you through this process. And again, that's where a partner can help you map what's the right tool for your move. But again, you won't run out of tools to have an accelerated migration. So in closing, once you migrate, again, as I mentioned earlier, cost optimize. You want to save. The reason why you're doing migration is to save money. It's to modernize, right? Don't move and just leave it alone. You want to kind of continually keep improving on that process. Limit replatforming, refactoring if you can to accelerate the move. Learn how to use the cloud, and then jump into a more modern architecture. So with that, thank you. I appreciate the time again, Ron, and I'll hand it back to you.